Good morning, friends. My name is Suzanne McAllister. I'm with the Vegan Spirituality Group of Philadelphia, with the Paw Project, Post Animal Use World Project, and Conversations with the Friendly Vegan. It is April 17th, 2024. I'm here with my colleague, Ann Piotrowski, who is involved in all those ventures I just mentioned. And we're talking today because we conducted a meetup, an online meetup on Monday evening, which was to discuss the new movie Christspiracy that was in the theaters briefly March 20th and March 24th. And the subtitle is there a spiritual way to kill an animal? And that was how we uh, build our meetup. And there was quite a bit of interest. It turned out that I think there were maybe 9 of us in the meeting. A couple of people were not able to attend. And interestingly, of those, I think 3 of us had actually seen the film. So I thought we were going to be discussing the film. Actually, what we ended up discussing, those of us who had seen it, obviously the film, but those who hadn't, just their impressions of it from the title and the trailer. So that was, and it was a lively discussion, which Ann and I will go over now. But Ann, why don't you say, you were the one that thought it would be a good idea for us to do this follow-up. So tell me what's on your mind.
Yeah. Well, I figured a lot of times we will do this post-Zoom recording just for people who couldn't attend, or even for people who did attend, to have kind of a little summary or something to remember what we did. So I thought it was a great discussion.
And
We did go over the hour. Yep.
Let me interrupt for one moment. You had
Yeah.
asked me to give a little synopsis of the
Oh,
movie.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
forgot to do that. So for
Okay.
those of you who know nothing about this movie, Anne, why don't you say something about it?
Oh, so the film Christspiracy is made by the filmmakers who made Cowspiracy and Seaspiracy. Well, you did say they asked the question, is there a spiritual way to kill an animal? And it really, that's kind of the thesis of it, is to try to answer that question through interviewing many religious leaders and scholars, and going over the translations of the Bible and such, to see if it's what it actually says, and what it says about Jesus and Jesus's habits of what they landed on is that the evidence that they gathered points to that Jesus was vegetarian, as were many other people who featured in the Bible. So
And one other very significant point, I think, in the movie was that those of us who were raised Christian, and probably other religions too, who learned about Jesus going into the temple and basically um, uh, challenging the rabbis and the temple leaders, and that we had always been taught that he was primarily against the money changers, that they had soiled the temple by sort of wheeling and dealing. The focus of this movie is, was he really mostly upset about what was animal slaughter going on, which we know was happening,
right,
and that they called that essentially the temple was a slaughterhouse.
right,
And so they did a lot of exploration of what the words in the Bible in the ancient Aramaic actually were. Was he throwing the thieves out, which is what I was taught, or was he throwing the murderers out? And
hmm
that to me was a seminal part of the film as well. There were no counter arguments, which I would have liked to at least have one other scholar who would agree that that was what the word was. It was not
mm,
thieves, it was murderers.
right,
Or somebody countering it who had just as much education as the woman they did interview.
right. Right.
So anyway,
Right,
go on.
right. And I think where they were leading, and maybe this was just my interpretation, but was that the temple, you know, people were just people who benefited from selling animals as sacrifices, right? That perhaps the conventional interpretation is just a convenient one that supported the economics, and then that with Jesus coming in and being critical of that could have been just a threat that ultimately led to his death.
Right.
Removal of that threat of the basis of their economy, which was animals,
Yeah.
and killing animals. So I think what the fact that 3 out of 9 of us saw it, I think more people would see it if it was available, but it's not available to stream, and it was only showing in theaters a couple of days. And if you couldn't make those days, then you can't see it yet.
Mhm.
I do think more people will watch it, but one of the questions that came up during our discussion, I think is an important one, is will any non-vegans watch it? Because sure, we are interested in the topic, but are any Christians going to look at that title or look at the content or the description of it or the trailer and be like, oh yes, I want that? Because in general, people don't want to have their status quo challenged. They're
Mhm.
uncomfortable with that. So do people want to go into a theater and feel uncomfortable for an hour and a half or 2 hours or whatever it is? Um, but one of the things that I thought about since our discussion is that even if that's the case, even if it only preaches to the choir, so to speak, that I do think for us as people who are vegan and vegan advocates, I think it can spark discussion. So I can see, like, for you and I, Suzanne, and for really anybody who was at that meeting or anybody who's interested, that that we could raise the topic with our friends and family, and even when we do, if you do tables or whatever, to say, I saw this documentary. Here's what it was about. What's your perspective, and use it as a kind of a starting off point as for this. It's an important topic. It's an interesting topic.
Mhm.
Uh, so
Yeah.
yeah,
So a couple of thoughts I have, and I agree with you about what you just said. One of the questions that really was striking to me of one of the women that had not seen it, who was on the call with us, who is Christian, and I think very involved in her Christian faith, also a vegan and runs a sanctuary. And she said, is it anti-Christian?
right,
And so I think just in the title Christspiracy, there's this idea, which is actually what the filmmakers are saying, is that there's been a cover up, but it is not anti-Christian at all. In
hmm,
fact, it made me feel more connected to my Christian roots. But I think for most Christians, they might be turned off just by the title.
yeah,
And so that's just something that I think the filmmakers are going to have to accept,
yeah,
that there may be a whole cadre of people who they would love to see it, but might be turned off just by the title. And somebody on the call made a very good point, which is that the filmmakers have a brand, which is
yes,
Cowspiracy, Seaspiracy, now Christspiracy. And I was willing to watch it because I like their brand.
yeah,
But I think the brand really caters to those of us in the vegan movement, the animal rights movement. And so, again, that's a very small group, but is that enough, like you're saying, where we are going to get out and spread the word, which we certainly will do?
right, right,
A second thought was that, again, Christspiracy was narrowly focused, the title, on Christ. And yet,
right,
in the film, one of the things that I really appreciated is that pretty much every religion was covered, and the filmmakers interviewed imams and Buddhist monks and a rabbi,
rabbi, hmm,
and they tried to interview the Dalai Lama. They didn't get to him, but they talked to one of his people. So Again, it's got a very broad, it covered a lot of ground, but you would not know that necessarily, again,
Yeah,
from the title.
right, right.
So,
Yeah, yeah. It is quite a trick that they're going to have to pull off, is to try to get other types of, people into the theater to see that, or even if it's streaming, to get people to watch it. Just a couple of things I wanted to make sure we covered is that, again, I think sometimes, like, one thing that came up a few times during that session two was, when we do talk to people, because it may turn out that we're the only ones that see it, and then it's, I think, maybe incumbent upon us, or we most of us feel this responsibility to speak for animals who can't speak for themselves, right? Is that, to not get defensive in the face of other people's defensiveness,
mhm,
right? So
yeah,
to kind of be skilled and open, and be able to talk with people who might be a bit closed off to this, in a way that invites them to feel a little vulnerable, as um, their going beliefs are being pushed on a little bit. Um, One of the things that we've had people come up to our tables. I mean, I know I've had many people, more than I was surprised by, like more than I would have expected, who say, uh, God put the animals here for us, like we have dominion over
the
them, right? So that's
dominion,
another
yeah,
thing that came up.
argument.
And I know that one thing that I have, at first I didn't know how to respond. That was one participant was like, I feel bad because I didn't know what to
Yeah,
say when somebody said something. And that's, how many times has that happened, where it's like 2 hours later, I'm like, oh, I wish I had said
yeah.
something. But I know that that's just a subject that will come up again. And then it gives me the opportunity I take it as, like, when I don't know what to say, I take it as a sign, like my body's telling me it's time to listen. So
Mm,
if the words don't
good
come,
point.
then
Yeah,
my voice needs a break, and my ears need
yeah,
to kick
yeah.
in. So that's kind of the way I look at it. But I want the
I
response that I've some.
also, I just
Yeah,
want to say that we're over the time that we allotted.
yeah.
So
I know there's so much to say. There's so much to
that's what
say.
I figured, and
I
I
know.
was thinking that maybe we might do another one of these, and focus on a particular issue
Yeah.
connected to the film that we saw, or how do we get the word out to people,
Yes.
not just
Yeah.
vegans, non-vegans, Christians, non-Christians,
Yeah.
because I think that's kind of where you're headed, which is that it may be incumbent on us
Right.
to spread the word.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Anything
Right.
else you want to say before we sign?
Yeah, but we'll do it in another one. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. And thank you always for your thoughtfulness.
Same to
Really
you. Same to
appreciate
you.
it. Okay.